Alright guys, welcome back to VALORANT News. We are counting down the hours until the start of Masters Toronto, and big questions being raised on whether Rostermania is going to happen very shortly after this tournament indeed. FNATIC go in as one of the key favourites, and rumour has it remarkably over the last 24 hours or so that Leo, a player who has been sidelined unfortunately for FNATIC for a very long time since his absolute heyday not really that long ago, may well be trialling or looking to return, but not of course with FNATIC. They're currently in a great spot, they've got crashes in, things are looking rather good, but rumours have started to emerge that Leo may be ready to return, but if he is going to come back, it's not going to be with the team that he most recently was on. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Couple of updates around the Valorant world. Firstly, Shazam back on Team Liquid. Actually thought this is really kind of cool. I'm sure WestJet has his opinion on this, right? But yeah, I thought it was nice to see anyway, because I know that Shazam's been going through a tricky time lately, shall we say. But yeah, Liquid have him back, and as Shazam says, excited for what's next with that relationship. Of course, the Sentinels guys and the other teams are out there in Toronto as well, getting ready to go for the big tournament, which is beginning, of course, very shortly indeed. Here are the Heretics guys. We've got the CN Tower in the background. We've got Gen.G Fishy going blonde for the weekends. So, you know, is it going to work out? Of course, we looked at some of the drama yesterday with MIBR and Fraud, saying that, you know, this Fortnite kid's going to get slammed when we play them on the main stage. We'll see which way that goes, but I'm buzzing to see if that actually happens. We also got this, right? Woot is here with Texture. So, yeah, just nice to see all the players out there getting ready to go. We also had this one from, as you guys can just about see, I'll just zoom in a touch here, on Paper Rex, and yeah, we've got obviously the full roster with everyone involved from top to bottom, including the coaches and all that good stuff. So Paper Rex, how are they going to get on? Of course, they're starting in the Swiss stage. Some of the other teams, well, they weren't number one team in their region, therefore they didn't get the bye, as it was RIQ, of course, from the Pacific region eventually did. This is the Masters Trophy, what they're all playing for over the coming days, and they're also going to be revealing a new map as well. So that's going to be set. Tarek versus Disguised Toast. We've seen this type of stuff before. 22nd of June, new map reveal show match. So that's coming. Like, I do think the maps in Valorant do intrigue me because, you know, in Counter-Strike, and obviously you don't want to compare too much, but in Counter-Strike, a map like Overpass was refined, you know, 10, 12, 15 times before they found a version they liked. And even then, there are always kind of changes. I think in Valorant, I know that many pros have said this, that a map comes in and it's not like the maps in Valorant are bad. Like, I think they're pretty good in general, but there certainly are things that I was expecting, shall we say, more changes to maps over the last 12 to 24 months than we tend to see, right? I mean, I don't think Ascent needs to change, and they have changed some things, right? Stopping the wall bangs, those type of things. And Ascent fundamentally is a good layout, fine. But I do think there's various other maps that there could be some consideration for more map changes. We don't see that many, right? We saw the occasional ones with binds, but, you know, they'll take a map out, they'll bring it back in, and it's basically the same. You know, something like Split. I think Split's probably fine as well. But there are some maps out there, certainly some of the newer ones, you know, Lotus, Sunset, things like this, Pearl especially, that, you know, yeah, they've changed some things. But I think there's generally a push towards, let's just bring a new map out, rather than maybe try and perfect some existing maps, because there's plenty of maps in the game, you know, Fracture, among others, that we could have a better rotation than we have, but there's certain maps that either maybe are just fundamentally broken and could need a serious refresh, or that, you know, need to exist in the first place. So I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that, whether you prefer new maps coming through or making more adjustments to older maps to see if they can be improved. You know, maybe there's some middle ground to be had. I don't mind new maps either, it's new content at the end of the day. But I think my point is that at this point, we've actually got quite a lot of maps that can be used in the map pool. It's just most of them aren't very good. So that's my perspective. You guys may agree or disagree. Before we go into some of the roster drama, I did want to quickly touch on this clip here from Sacy. So, of course, he's now with MIBR, but there has been some talk, of course, about his Sentinels days recently, what he's going to do next, and he actually sits down and says, I won't say it's impossible to see Sacy back in competitive. For now, it's not going to be happening this year, but of course, Sacy, after stepping away from Sentinels, confirms that you never know, a return to competing isn't impossible. I think, look, he obviously talks about some other things that he's getting involved with, wants to achieve in life. Totally get it, and it's great to see. And look, do I think Sacy will return? Maybe not, but I just think that for pretty much any player who retires from anything, certainly as competitive as these guys are, it's very difficult to get away from that. It's very difficult to wake up, watch competitive Valorant, and not feel like, damn, I should be back in there, right? Like, I think TEN's for sure will feel this. I don't think that Tentis made the wrong decision to retire, but he came back for Qubit for a little bit because they needed him, and he was like, yeah, you know what, I'll play some competitive Valorant again, it'll be fun. And, you know, I think he enjoyed it, despite the fact that I didn't do very well subbing him in, unfortunately, but he did pretty well still individually. But we see this in various esports and even sports. You know, players retire, and then they're like, well, you know, I'll come back. But as Sacy says, I miss it. Obviously, it's hard. That routine was part of my life, and this is a story for many players, the competitive part of it. You know, they always miss something competitive. So maybe in a while, we might see me back in the competitive scene, he says. So what do you guys think about that, right? Because I know that this season there was a thought for some time that maybe Sacy, you know, was a big loss for Sentinels at the start of the season when things weren't going so well. Now, of course, they've got better. They're one of the big favourites going into Masters Toronto. But as he says, maybe as a coach, maybe as a player, like, who knows what's going to happen, right? But it's an interesting idea anyway. Maybe Sacy could come back as a coach of a team, as a player of a team, because right now, you know, he's doing content, but I think it's just very difficult to step away completely from anything competitive in your life, and maybe Sacy's feeling the implications of that right about now. But the big talking point of players stepping away is around Leo, one of the greatest players to ever do it in Valorant, you know, multiple champion, but unfortunately, for various reasons, hasn't really played at all. He's been on the sidelines for a very long time, and it's kind of unclear still exactly what's happened there that's led to this situation, but we've seen multiple times FNATIC have said, look, we're working with Leo on his, you know, physical, mental health to help him get to a position where he can play again. And they thought it was maybe going to be possible this season, right? They were hopefully preparing for Leo's return. They, of course, brought in briefly Sayonara. Of course, Kayak came in, and then they brought in Crashies. And there was still kind of a feeling that, okay, maybe Crashies is going to be a bit of a, you know, a short-term fix then once Leo's back. But there was a feeling that, well, you know, is Leo ever going to be able to return? It is, you know, it's a big question, right? And we've not really known the truth behind this for some time. And it's very unfortunate for a player at that level and with his unbelievable talent and versatility to be sidelined for so long. But maybe the tides on this are somewhat turning. So there's this account, is Leo back yet? Who's doing loads of tweets, and this was one of them to say, you know, as it stands, it's not happening yet. However, Tanmay, who knows a thing or two about what's happening behind the scenes, not always, you know, #1 reputable whatever, but you know, I don't think would say this without serious reason to do so. Tanmay says, well, kinda yes, he's trialing for a team. Now, this tweet then got deleted, but still, and well, we'll see why, or maybe not why, but some of the reaction to it in a second. But what do we think about this? Is Leo back? Maybe not fully, but he might be back in some form. So this tweet then goes, but there was in the replies, Mark says, since it's now deleted, just say that you weren't trolling. And Tanmay says, no, I wasn't trolling, right? So, you know, maybe Tanmay felt like this tweet was a bit much, right? Putting the stuff out there, maybe decided, okay, better keep this off the timeline. But that was tweeted. And in the replies, Tanmay says, look, I'm not trolling about this. To my understanding, that is what has been going on. So, fascinating, right? Because, of course, FNATIC had Leo. You know, then when they didn't have Leo, things are obviously more of a challenge. But it seems like with Crashies this year, in recent couple of months, they've finally found a way where they can still be an absolute top team and potentially go on to even win this tournament. So for Leo, like, it's interesting timing, because if Leo was finally ready to come back and felt physically, you know, and everything, like the fitness, match fitness was going to be there again to return, I'm sure that FNATIC were kind of maybe hoping or expecting that they would just be able to bring Leo back into the roster. But the way that things have gone lately, that is not going to happen, right? Because, you know, Crashies is doing a killer job with the team, and the team is clearly very confident in their current iteration. So, potentially, Leo's trying out somewhere else, and where might that be, I guess, is one of the key questions. I know that there's been some talk about, could it be Vitality, right? With Vitality looking to make some changes, is that what we may or may not see? That would be a remarkable storyline. Not sure how likely that is, but after effectively a year away from competing, you know, and now FNATIC have kind of got back to where they want to be, there's big questions where he may or may not go next. So intrigued your thoughts on that in the comments below. You know, if Leo's returning, it's a great story for the scene, but it would be fascinating if he doesn't return on FNATIC, right? And right now, if it is going to happen, that looks like probably what's going to occur. Now, let's go through a couple of roster things on the potentially the Chinese side, actually. This is the EDG team, we've got Kankan, we've got Smoggy. Now, they have been playing around with a few players. They, of course, had Simon, then there was drama. They had Gianni, who they might be getting rid of. And anyway, there's this new guy. So it looks like potentially Bianc. Not sure who this is, but that's the rumor anyway, because they were looking to find a fifth going into the upcoming tournaments that they are going to play, certainly at the World Cup. This is pretty funny. LEV continuing to have a difficult time. They're playing Cubit Academy. They're down 17-3. So anyway, the new LEV team, Okonos, Sato coming in there. Doesn't really seem like anything has changed. But yeah, they made a couple of changes. Demon 1 might be sitting on the bench laughing a little bit. We think maybe an opportunity for Envy for him in the future if they were to win Ascension, and therefore they would need a player in the Pro League. That's an intriguing opportunity. And a couple of other teams that are worthy of note. Sentinels, don't know who they're scrimming. They're up 9-0, and we had NRG up 9-4 against someone or another. That's now a good couple of days ago. But yeah, as I said over the last few days, the countdown is seriously on now to Masters Toronto, beginning literally tomorrow with Team Heretics and Paper X in 1 day and 5 hours time. So the tournament's about to get underway. Very much enjoyed your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.